Our next award goes to Educator of the Year. And if you've lived in Charlotte for any period of time, you know his name well. I'd like to welcome now Maureen O'Boyle with WBTV, and she is going to give remarks on behalf of him, Mr. Steve Crump.
We never get to see each other unless we're all dressed up, because usually we're on the news at the same time. So Erica, thank you. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and to our students who were honored tonight. I really looked back on my life and thought, gosh, I haven't done much with myself, have I? You all are amazing and so deserving of this award. Everybody here tonight, you're all part of a movement that is making my hometown of Charlotte a better place to live. And I appreciate everything that you're doing. When I was asked to introduce Steve as we get ready to honor him as Educator of the Year, I was, how much time do I have? And I was told, oh, it's really just a couple of, I'm like, you know, this is Steve Crump, right? Steve Crump, a couple of minutes, I'll do my best. But boy, these are all of his awards. They go over here, several places of paper. I don't think I can name them all, but I can tell you one thing about this man. First of all, I'm so happy you're here. God is good. He is an amazing human being, a faithful man, a wonderful husband, and a great, beloved friend and coworker. He is being honored, obviously, because of his work and the body of work that he has, not only in broadcasting, but of course his documentaries, is astounding. They are, as he describes them, his babies. We believe they are your masterpieces. You find a way, Steve, to take part of history. Sometimes it's the ugly truth of history. You open it up from a different angle. You tell the stories that we may have heard, but you tell them differently. You tell them so beautifully. Our hearts hurt. At moments, we feel that joy of triumph when those people who are fighting on behalf of civil rights movement, especially the Orangeburg massacre 50 years later. So many people left in the wake of that, having to find their way. What an amazing piece of not only research and journalism, but just humanity, the people you found and the stories you told. It moves every single person. How he's been able to do this while winning 8 regional Emmy Awards in broadcasting, the Black Journalist National Journalist of the Year award on top of all the other awards. He has almost 30 documentaries. He puts 2 years into almost every single one of them. They're amazing. They celebrate the famous. Of course, the greatest celebrates Muhammad Ali as Cassius Clay growing up in his hometown, where Cassius Clay, Muhammad Ali, grew up in Louisville, Kentucky. He celebrates also the infamous, the musicians that you maybe didn't even know grew up in our own backyard. And he also celebrates those who quietly, never sought out celebrity, who made their mark and changed our futures. The unsung heroes who carried on the fight in Orangeburg, the African-American jockeys of thoroughbred racing, the backbone of the sport's origins, who, as you so aptly titled your documentary, were forgotten at the finish line. Your documentaries bring them to life. Your films honor their legacies. They educate us, Steve. Almost 2 decades before, the well-known documentarian Ken Burns did the country music docuseries recently on PBS. He's been working on it for many years, but long before that, there was Steve's documentary, Sojourn of the Strings. In that, Steve traces the journey and the origins of the banjo back to when it was created on this soil by slaves brought here, who played its sweet music, and for just a short time of that day, for just a moment, it would drown out the misery of their oppression, connecting them with the music of their real home. He told that story beautifully, as he does every single story. Crumpy, as I affectionately call him, finds a sweet spot in a story. It's a place that it's easy to just spray a story and find that one character who jumps out of the crowd. But he goes deeper. He finds something that lasts and stays with you forever. I believe God gave him this gift, and I believe to God's glory, he has always done his absolute best to give his great honor to the man above and to share it with us. I do have to say a few things about his awards, though. Do you know? Okay, I'm going to try to roll too fast. All right. FilmWorks been recognized Edgar R. Murrow Award. The Smithsonian Institution has also showcased his films. Recognized by the Library of Congress, the Museum of Broadcast Communications as well, national film festivals all over the country. Hometown also gave him the Distinguished Achiever of the Year. Oh, and it goes on. Steve was honored also, this is very impressive, by the Congressional Black Caucus Foundation, and of course here in Charlotte, for the Martin Luther King Jr. Medallion, which honors people who move working forward to promote racial equality and justice. But Steve, I think, will tell you every single award that you get from fellow journalists is probably the most amazing, and to have it right here in your second home of Charlotte. Please look, Steve Crump and what he is all about. Congratulations, my friend.
Being curious, being aware, having that perspective, and knowing the shoulders that you stand upon perhaps gives you a sense of understanding that you're able to put into your work as you come into these hallways every day here.
From the Nuba Mountains in South Sudan, I'm Steve Crump.
For now, we're at the White House. Steve Crump, WBTV, on your side.
Hello and welcome. I'm Steve Crump. Medgar Evers was a Mississippi native who was born in the town of Decatur.
I'm Steve Crump in Johannesburg, South Africa. Thanks so much for watching.
Well, you know, I think from a very simple perspective, I've always thought of myself as a guy that just goes to work every day.
This came after Ice Age. It's rated several food plants in Mississippi.
I mean, I've always been curious about a lot of things, and I'll use this as an example. I can think back to where I was a senior in high school. I was the only African American in my class in this Third World Studies course. And it was when apartheid was at its peak in the mid-1970s. We had not heard the name Nelson Mandela or Desmond Tutu. And it was one of those things, just by the numbers in the aggregate, you had a population of 20 million, 16 million blacks being controlled by 4 million whites. And back in 1974, I knew that I would be in South Africa one day. And I went twice and did a couple documentaries from there.
2 to 3 million people call the South African township of Soweto home. And it is here that...
You know, for me, and the story I like to tell about coming to Charlotte, I remember a June 1983 article in Black Enterprise magazine, and it profiled the city. Harvey Gantt was in his first term as mayor. There were things happening at the airport. There was Sam Johnson, Lincoln Mercury, and I could kind of read about this town that was part of the New South. And I just kind of said to myself, it's like, gosh, that's where I want to be. And, you know, fast forward some 35 plus years later, and I'm still here. And the fact that I've been able to, you know, make it work in some form or fashion, I think in some regards, it's just been pretty amazing.
And instead of always covering the crime and things like that, he always finds, and this is what he says, I have a good in the hood story. And when he says he has a good in the hood story, the producers say, Steve Crump, you go for it. You do that good in the hood story.
And I think it's about information that you have in your backyard. I mean, for me, having done a lot of documentaries on the African American experience, the civil rights experience.
From the Edmund Pettus Bridge, I'm Steve Crump. Thanks so much for joining us.
And, you know, everybody talks about people such as Martin Luther King Jr., Malcolm X, Medgar Evers. John Lewis, so many of the luminaries. But all you have to do is look in our backyard here, where you've had people such as Franklin McCain, who initiated the sit-in movement in Greensboro, Dorothy Counts, who just went through abject hell to integrate Harding High School back in 1957. You had the situation where you had the bombings of the homes of Kelly and Fred Alexander, along with Julius Chambers and Reginald Hawkins. So Charlotte in the civil rights timeline, and you go right down the road to Rock Hill, South Carolina, and you had jail no bail. This area was very rich in a lot of those diamonds that people mined in terms of defining a legacy known as the civil rights movement.
I don't know if they ever made him like Steve to begin with. He is an original. And you look at who else, as an African-American journalist, interviews the KKK.
What's the message you all want to get out right now?
Our message right now is that whites in America need to.
Only Steve does. I can tell you when I first got to the market and was getting introduced, I finally had to tell Steve, all right, Steve, I can't meet any more people. He's so well connected, so well regarded. He knows everybody. His Rolodex is probably amongst the leaders in not only in Charlotte, but I'd put him up against anybody in any market in the United States.
He's taught me a lot about the city. He's a great role model in the newsroom. Taught us that, it's important to work hard if you want to accomplish a lot in this business.
And I still want to be like him when I grow up.
Yeah, right. I think that we as a community are especially blessed to have a personality such as Steve. His ability to report the news, but it's also his ability to connect with people in the community and to be a part of the community.
He is like one of a kind, and there's nobody like Steve Crump, and nobody can tell a story like Steve Crump. Nobody can do a documentary like Steve Crump. Nobody can interview somebody like Steve Crump. Nobody can take on the controversial issues like Steve Crump. He's one of a kind.
If there is a subtitle to a Steve Crump story, I think it would have to be inclusion. It would be opening doors. It would be demonstrating awareness within a community. It would be showing the possible far as what can happen, not only as a journalist, as a storyteller, but also in terms of how we engage. And I think that in some respects, it's just the adage of being open and realizing, how things have changed all for the better within this community. And perhaps that's the subtitle of my story. I was diagnosed last year with colon cancer. And what was going to be some routine treatments turned into hell in a handbasket, to be quite blunt. I ended up contracting MRSA. I was in the hospital for some 51 days. And at one point, I was on a ventilator, dialysis, feeding tube. My right lung had collapsed. And quite candidly, a lot of people didn't expect me to make it.
First, we are really thrilled to have Steve Crump with us. He's been in our living rooms for years. It's been a big story.
We're optimistic. We're faithful, we're prayerful. I have a lot of support. I feel like we're going to beat it. We've come a long way. I mean, this kind of shocked me in a lot of regards, but the fight has been deep, but at the same time we're making strides, and with that I remain very optimistic. I think part of the significance of this award and of what Gerald Johnson and the folks at the Post Foundation have managed to do is empower this community. When you're able to impact education and help young people along, that's one part of it. But also too, when you look at the critical state that newspapers are in, especially black newspapers, and you go back this summer where the Chicago Defender had to shut down. I mean, I think that that's absolutely heinous. But at the same time, the folks at the Charlotte Post, under the leadership and guidance of a Gerald Johnson, they have found relevance in terms of where a black press is a meaningful press and is a press that can make a difference within a community. I didn't know that I was this strong. I didn't know I had this much fight within me. I didn't know I wanted to live this bad. And that's where it is. As I've said before, I don't want to die with my music left in me. I still have documentaries to do. There's still stories to tell. There's still people and communities to empower. And that's the Steve Crump that I want to be.
Steve Crump, WBTV, on your side.
Ladies and gentlemen, our Educator of the Year, Mr. Steve Crump.
Wow. To borrow a line from Cleavon Little and Blazing Saddles, let me pull this thing out. He didn't say pull this thing out, but you get the gist. All right, there's no teleprompter, so that means my great friend who I love dearly, I call her Momo, it means I have to pull out the reader cheaters. So many people to thank tonight, but not enough time. And based on the current situation in my life that you heard a little bit about, I first need to thank God for his grace, his blessings, his mercy, and his guidance, obviously at the top of the list. You heard a little bit about where I was this time a year ago with the MRSA. And you got the whole list of what was happening with me, but quite candidly, I couldn't even walk this time a year ago. And thinking about tonight's recognition, Educator of the Year, what an honor. Dictionaries define the word educator as a person who provides instruction, education, a teacher, if you will. And I can think of people in this community who have lived up and personified that definition. Some of them right here in this room tonight. Individuals who I love dearly, like the man sitting back there who I call my adopted father, former State Senator Charlie Danley. Charlie? By the way, he just turned 95. But so many of Charlie's peers from back in the day that impacted this community, individuals such as Pop Miller, I know you all remember Pop, Robert L. Davis, Cat Crosby, and Libby Randolph, to name just a few. When I got the word from the chairman, as I call him, Gerald Johnson, about this honor, and I said, who, me? Educator of the Year? I said, wait a minute, now there's a backstory. It would take 2 universities, a community college, summer school thrown in, and 5 years of education to get that 4-year degree in communications. True story. You can call Eastern Kentucky University. They have the records up in Richmond, Kentucky. And here's the punchline, truth be told, and that is, bottom line is, my academic transcript reads like a bad credit report. I wonder if they have something called academic karma. To borrow a line from my good friend, who some of the folks here know, Byron Pitts, formerly of CBS News 60 Minutes and now at ABC Nightline, and he regrets not being here this evening. He's on a shoot in New Hampshire. I heard from Byron this morning. And Byron likes to tell people, I didn't graduate cum laude. I graduated rather, thank you, Lottie. I had to attribute that. I'm too clever for me to think up. And there is another person here who I need to thank in a very sincere way. Some of you all were there for this event. It has been 3 years, 11 months, and 18 days since I married my wife, Kathy. She's had an amazing and a profound impact on my life, and yes, that anniversary is fast approaching. Since being diagnosed with cancer on July 21st of last year, she's been there every step of the way. She is my rock, she is my everything, and I love her so much. driving me what seems to be an endless string of doctor's appointments. We have an appointment at Emory Hospital in Atlanta on Monday. Seeing this woman sleep in a lounge chair overnight in a hospital room, being my advocate, our advocate, questioning medical professions, preparing meals, dispensing pills, keeping our household running despite the obvious channels. Honey, I could not have come this far without you, your love, your support, and understanding, and for that I'm eternally grateful. Stand up, baby. Take a bow. As they say in the church, I'm not about to raise up an offering, okay? But do we have any members here from Friendship Missionary Baptist Church? Just raise your hand. True story. So we come home from Emory right after my surgery. Some of you all may have been there for this. And Kathy was at the 8 o'clock service. So the esteemed pastor, Clifford Jones, had mentioned that early voting had started. And he basically says, oh, up in the balcony there, Mayor Vi Lyles is here. Vi, would you stand up, please? My wife stands up. And in the grace that my wife displays, she says, I'm not Mayor Vi Lyles, but she's done a good job, and please go out and vote. So since we have the both of them in the room, would you please, both of you all stand up, our mayor and my wife. You see? Now, who could rob the bank and get away with it? There's also an incredible network of friends that have helped me in this journey. Among them, you heard from them in the video and earlier with the invocation. Friends like Reverend Ricky Woods, First Baptist West, and his wife, Annette, who makes an incredible banana pudding and has us sent over to the house. Friends like Bill and Willetta Jones, who have been unselfish with their time. I need to thank the medical group at Atrium Healthcare, who has a table tonight, Atrium Northeast, and the folks at Emory and Atlanta that carried out surgery a few weeks ago. They say they got it all. We've been back for one follow-up. We have another follow-up next week. And one person who's been a part of my care team is my home health care nurse who's here tonight, Vanessa Aldridge of Personal Health Care. Vanessa. I am very grateful to my WBTV family, many of them who are here tonight. Meteorologist Al Conklin, David Wisnett, Maureen O'Boyle, my news director, Kim Saxon, and one of our latest additions, I don't see her, I know she's here somewhere, but where's Cheryl Brayboy? Cheryl? Jack, her husband, said she was gonna be here.
She is here. There she is, right there.
Oh, there she is. Like I said, no teleprompter. A few other thank yous here, and then maybe we will raise up that offering. But grateful for my spiritual family at Our Lady of Consolation Catholic Church. Grateful for many of you guys for sending prayers and notes on social media, cards and gifts that have been sent to the station in our home. And I would be remiss if I didn't take this moment to thank Gerald Johnson, who I call the chairman, and his brother, Bob Johnson & Johnson. One of the things that I pointed out in that video is the fact that the Chicago Defender had to shut down its printing operation this year. They're now an online newspaper only. That paper's only 100 years old. But what Gerald and his staff, that they've managed to do with the work that goes on with the Charlotte Post Foundation, and as you've heard tonight accurately, provide opportunities for scores of deserving students in our community that make Charlotte such a better place. Sharing the African American experience through creating documentaries has become a passionate labor of love. And the interesting part about that is, I didn't do all that well with film studies at Eastern Kentucky University, but what a ride it's given me. You saw some of the video, but to have been to places like Johannesburg, Sudan, Sarajevo, places in Kenya, and even in the filmmaking process to basically do stories where I've come face to face with individuals like Congressman John Lewis, musicians like Pete Seeger, Herbie Hancock, Wynton and Branford Marsalis, filmmaker Spike Lee, Merle Evers, Dr. John Hope Franklin, and you saw the clip of Desmond Tutu and I together. And some folks are saying, there he goes again, dropping names. The name is Crump, not Trump. That's Crump with a C. While this form of storytelling has put me in front of national and global figures, I can't help but leave out some of the influential individuals that you heard about in the video, people like Franklin McCain and Dorothy Counts. And my philosophy, and we're almost done here, regarding documentaries, very simple. Cheer for the underdog, educate the viewer, and empower the less fortunate. I didn't get here alone. Support came from a loving family and teachers who cared, but also, as a journalist, I stand on some very wide shoulders that once occupied the halls at WBTV, pioneering African-American news anchors like John Blunt and Ken Kuntz, groundbreaking reporters like the first African-American female to report the news at WBTV, who I love like a sister. Debbie, please stand up. Debbie Mann Gibbs. And not to leave out Channel 3's first photographer of color, Jan Spence and George Williams, who shepherded me along the way when I had a head full of hair. And of course, the most famous of them all, another good friend of mine, Bill Whitaker of CBS 60 Minutes, who was here during my formative years. In closing, I will keep it brief. And that is, I was just thinking about, especially riding through the streets of Uptown today, but there's no such thing as an accident. And to borrow a line from Stevie Wonder's as, God has you exactly where he wanted you to be placed. And the reason why I bring that up, think of the way today started. And in my journey, just like Dr. Brown's journey, and that is dealing with the issue of cancer. What happened earlier today? It was the Komen Walk. There were thousands of people showing how they want to take on this disease and find a cure for it. And I call it a moment of faith in being ironic. Final thing here. If there's anything that you remember from my remarks tonight, please do this favor. Men and women, yourself, get yourselves checked. Get yourself checked. Ladies, get those mammograms. Brothers, put on the gown. And the reason why I say that, you go through what I've been through and we're still fighting. I still plan on, resuming things at Channel 3. And yes, there will be plans for documentaries next year. Stay tuned. But at the end of the day, you end up with a diagnosis like what I've been through and realizing as much as it is, standing up here is cathartic, it's therapeutic, and it does provide some healing. And the bottom line is, something like that is not necessarily always a reality check, it is a mortality check. Do yourselves and do your family a favor and get checked. To the Charlotte Post Foundation, thank you so much. And to those of you in this incredible looking audience, thank you, God bless, and good evening.